Thank you so much for inviting me. Um, I'm very happy to be here. I don't think I presented for Nature Vancouver before. And tonight, I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but you'll have an overview of our new analysis that we've done with the Coastal Waterbird Survey data. And you're the first people I present these data to. So it's, yeah, it's really nice to be here tonight. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. So tonight, we'll be trying to answer the question, how are coastal waterbirds doing in British Columbia? So just a few words about who we are. So I work for Birds Canada. I've been working for Birds Canada for about 6 years now, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. I've been living in Vancouver for the past 5 years. Very happy to live here. It's an amazing place for birding, as you all know. And so a little bit about Birds Canada. We are a non-profit organization all across Canada. And our mission is to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of wild birds. And so we do a lot of science, on-the-ground actions, innovative partnerships, public engagement, and science-based advocacy, which has been very interesting. A lot of our data and observations are collected by citizen scientists, and you might be one of them. And for this, I thank you very much, because thanks to you, we are able to identify significant bird population changes. And so that helps inform conservation planning. So very, very important. And here on this slide, I'm listing a few of our programs in BC that I'm managing. And maybe you are familiar with a few of them already. Most of our programs are accessible by beginner birders, but some require more advanced identification skills, such as the Coastal Waterbird Survey and the Marsh Monitoring Program. And today, I'll be focusing on data from the BC Coastal Waterbird Survey that volunteers help us. They help us with data collection all across the BC coast. And so this program is used to identify waterbirds population changes specifically. And you may ask, why bother monitoring waterbirds? Well, the goal is to have a good idea of how changes of the environment affect birds. And we do that by assessing their breeding success or population trends. And why waterbirds in particular? It's because they are very, very good indicators of the health of coastal and marine ecosystems. They're easy to detect. They are usually at the top of the food chain. They're able to move across areas. And also a lot of species are sensitive to environmental stressors, such as pollutants, habitat loss, or climate change. So before I dive in our data from the program, let's start off with a broad view of all birds in Canada. And here I'm showing a graph that is directly coming from the State of Canada's Birds 2024 report, which looked at over 50 years of data to describe the changing Canadian bird populations. And if I focus on waterbird species occurring in Canada, you can see that overall, doesn't work. There we go. Overall, waterfowl species, if I take the waterfowl, they are increasing in Canada quite significantly. So this is mostly thanks to wetland management plan across North America. If you look at seabird species specifically, they have had less dramatic changes in population, but for a lot of those species, we are actually lacking of reliable trend information. And so that's why it looks stable, but it's not that stable in reality. Like a lot of seabirds are actually declining. And finally, shorebirds. Shorebirds have declined quite steeply over the last decades, and we keep losing our shorebirds. So there's something with conservation priorities with shorebirds. So what about in BC specifically? Because this graph was coming from multiple programs across North America, especially in Canada. And so Okay, great, thanks. So if we focus specifically on the Coastal Waterbird Survey, so what is it exactly? So it's a volunteer program. This year we are coming into our 27th year. Uh, so the program started in 1999. And on the map, you can see the distribution of our survey sites in the southern part of BC, but we also have lots of sites on the central and north coast, and also in remote areas. We are actually getting some help from indigenous communities in some of the remote areas. So um, yeah, it's almost like 400 survey sites, so it's quite extensive, and it's a really good source of information for coastal waterbirds in BC. So how does it work? What do volunteers do exactly? So it's quite simple actually. So they basically walk their assigned beach or shoreline once a month, the second Sunday of each month specifically. So it's a coordinated survey, like everyone surveys pretty much at the same time, so that we don't have we're trying to avoid some sort of double counting, if you know what I mean. And the targeted window is the 2 hours of the high tide. So this is because we're better able to count water birds on the high tide. The only exception is shorebirds, but most birds are more easily counted on high tide. And so we collect, of course, like environmental data, the weather, the disturbance, and stuff like this. But we, of course, volunteers record each species, just like eBird, they do a count of the species. But for the program, they record each species as either inland, near shore, or offshore. And so that helps filter out some data sometimes for some analysis. And we don't count the birds that fly through the area. We're not there because they are not using really the habitat. So that's the protocol. So for our trend analysis, we published results of 20 years of trends 5 years ago. But this year we made a new analysis, and we slightly changed our models. And so I'm going to present some results here today. I'm not going to go into details about the methods, but one of the things we changed is that to predict bird abundance for a given year, each survey site is kind of borrowing information from the neighbor sites. And this is based on the fact that, like ecological responses that are closer in space, they are more similar than those further apart. So that's why we're using this kind of method of borrowing information from neighboring sites. So that not only leads to more robust predictions, but this is also very valuable in the areas where we are lacking of data. And so as you can imagine, that's critical for informing conservation actions in marine environments where in some areas we have less data available. So for the analysis, we are specifically targeting, we are discriminating different regions because we want to know if there are differences between regions. And so we used 4 different regions here, the outer coast, which includes the west coast of Vancouver Island, the central coast, and the north coast. We have the greater Vancouver area in green, but it's hidden by, by the survey sites in gray, so you don't see it on the map. And we have Juan de Fuca area and the Strait of Georgia. And we are targeting 53 species that are regularly detected by our volunteers. And so that includes different groups of waterbirds, gulls, ducks, herons, and other birds that use all these different shoreline habitats. And for the analysis, we are trying to separate also birds into different groups to see if there is patterns at the guild level. So we're using different migration strategies, like birds that are local breeders, like some gulls, for example, short distance migrants, an example with grebes that mostly breed in the interior of BC, and long distance migrants, like, for example, a lot of shorebirds breed in the Arctic and they come back in the winter. And so we want to see if the migration strategy is influencing the results. And we did the same with their diet. So we also discriminated groups with the diet. So we have like birds that eat fish, that the birds that prey on seafloor, herbivores and omnivores. So the response we use for our models is the maximum count at each survey site over the winter. And we are removing the extreme outliers. So for example, like if I take the herring spawn season, for example, as a lot of you know, bird numbers will explode as there is so much food. And so this can bias the analysis. So we try to remove these outliers for that trend analysis. Then we are able to estimate the annual percent change per year for a given area. And then we can produce some really cool trend lines for all our target species. And so here's an example with the oyster catcher. And as you can see, since the program started in 1999, oyster catchers have been showing increasing trends in BC overall. And not only across BC, but in all 4 different regions that you can see in the different colors here. Are you seeing the graph well, or? I hope so.
Yes, the slides up to this were bad, but then it suddenly snapped into focus on this slide, so everything
Perfect.
good
The
here.
mysteries of Zoom. I love that. So, okay, that's very encouraging. Of course, I'm showing a positive result here, but let's not forget that, oyster catcher habitat is very sensitive to human disturbance. And so, yeah, that's good news, but it's just according to our program data. So I will present trends for the different groups of birds now, and you'll see some different patterns depending on the groups. And I'm starting off with herbivorous species like geese and swans. So I took 3 examples here: Brent, Canada, and cackling goose. They are grouped together in the analysis, and trumpeter swan. In general, geese are showing stable or increasing trends over time. But I also took the example of the trumpeter swan. We need to watch the populations. It's not doing as well as other species, and so we need to watch those. For dabbling ducks that also mostly eat plants, they are mostly increasing or stable. I'm showing 3 different species here. But as you can see with the widgeon on the left, with the green curve, the Vancouver area is green. We have a lot of declines, notable declines in the Vancouver area for a lot of dabbling ducks. And so they are doing well, and they're doing well in Canada, as I showed you at the beginning. They're doing well in BC, but there are some notable declines around Vancouver. So it's not just positive overall. Let's look at gulls. People are usually surprised when I tell them that gull populations are declining. Like they're quite surprised because we see gulls all the time everywhere. But gull numbers have been decreasing over the past decades. And that kind of rings a bell because, those species are quite adaptable in general. But for the 3 examples I show here, Bonaparte's, short-billed, and the large gull grouped together, like it looks quite steep decline overall. So they're not doing that well. Loons. So I put the 3 most common loon species here. They're doing okay in BC, according to our data. But once again, in Vancouver area in green, you can see some sharp declines. So there's some warnings. If I look at grebes, we can see different trend patterns for different species. So if you look at the redneck grebe and the horn grebe, they are increasing in BC overall. But if you look at Western grebes, and for the analysis we group Western and Clark's grebe because they are quite hard to separate for a lot of birders, and so they are paired together for the analysis. But what you can see is one of the sharpest decline for any species, and they are declining for all the regions in BC, including in the north. So what does it mean for that species? It's really hard to know if populations are actually declining, for example, through lower survival or productivity, or if there is a shift in the areas that individuals are typically using during the winter. So maybe they move somewhere else because they find more food. So we don't know if they're actually declining or if they move somewhere else. It's hard to know, but the data are very clear. They are in serious trouble in BC, contrary to other grive species. When you look at cormorants, you would think that it's pretty stable. Overall, yes, it's pretty stable, but we have some localized declines, especially in the Salish Sea. And so the Strait of Georgia shows some worrying signs of declines for cormorants. I hope I'm not going too fast. I guess you can practice your identification as well with the photos. So now if you look at the most common seabirds, actual seabirds, like the alcid family, as we call them. So we have the common murre, the pigeon guillemot, and the marble murrelet. The program data don't show huge declines, but we have some localized declines. If you look at pigeon guillemot, for example, like in Vancouver, once again, they seem like they have decreased a lot. But I just wanted to point out here that they are not very well monitored by the survey in general because they're not always detected near the shorelines. And so we need more survey efforts for these seabirds in general. And we're actually doing that at Birds Canada because we are working with First Nations and we are helping them with their seabird monitoring programs. So for example, we've been helping a lot of Indigenous communities for marble murrelets, for example, specifically. And we are also launching a new program next year to try to monitor breeding colonies of certain species. So we are starting with a pigeon guillemot breeding survey. So we're launching a new project next year. And so we want to target potential colonies, especially in the Gulf Islands, to try to see like how is the breeding population doing. But this program, as I probably forgot to mention it, but this coastal waterbird survey data, they only focus on wintering populations. But we're also trying to monitor the breeding populations as well. Now let's look at our diving ducks. So I'll start with scoter species. We have three main species. So the scoters in general, they are benthivores, so they eat on the seafloor, mussels and clams. And what we've been observing is some sharp declines in some areas. Like if you look at the black scoter, it's a really sharp decline. And surf scoter and white-winged scoter, if you look at the Salish Sea, like the Strait of Georgia in general, they are quite declining. And for those birds, we know that they're shifting of habitat use. And I'll show you another example a bit later in the presentation, but we know they are moving a lot depending on where the food is. And so that's probably one reason why we see ongoing declining trends in the Salish Sea. But we're still trying to figure out what's going on here. But there's some declines. Mergansers, they're doing pretty well in BC in general, but I just wanted to show you to the right, if you look at the purple line, the Strait of Georgia, I don't know what's going on here, but the hooded merganser are disappearing from the Strait of Georgia. So if you have any idea what's going on, please let me know. I would like to know, but yeah, that's the only worrying sign here. But the rest, they are doing pretty well. If I look at other diving ducks, once again, we have some declines, especially in the Salish Sea. In the north, they are doing really well. They're increasing a lot. So yeah, it's really down in the Strait of Georgia and Vancouver area. And more diving duck species here. We have the harlequin duck, we have the long-tailed duck, and the scaup in general. So the long-tailed duck, really, really sharp declines everywhere. So that's really worrying. Although recently for the Fraser Estuary bird counts, I counted a lot of them in Boundary Bay. So that was kind of like really nice to see a lot of them, and also a lot of western grebes. Um, so it's kind of encouraging to see some numbers. There are some fluctuations over the years as well. Like we don't know exactly what's going on, but yeah, overall, like you can still see that there is a strong decline in long-tailed ducks, scaups as well. Harlequin duck, it depends on the areas.
Rémi, could you spend just a moment talking about the y-axis on your graph? It's a little hard for us to read the text,
Oh
and
yeah, for sure.
I see it's a log plot. So you're talking about steep declines. I mean, they look like really gentle graphs, but I guess because it's logarithmic, they're fairly dramatic declines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, for those who are not able to see, the X is the time, so the different years, and you can see the abundance. It's an index. It's an abundance index over the years. So basically, you're looking at population changes over the years here in these graphs. In case that was not really clear, but thanks, Harvey, to
Yeah, but
help it.
it's logarithmic. So if you plotted absolute numbers, the slope would be quite a bit steeper than what you're seeing there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's transformed into a.
So can on a percentage basis, can you give me some idea what, say, taking the combined BC black line there for the long-tailed duck from the left to the right over the 30 years or so that you're plotting? So how what fraction of the ducks are remaining at the end?
So, for example, if you look at the Harlequin duck in Vancouver area, like the green line,
Hmm.
we're kind of like losing almost half of the population in 25 years, kind of like. But as you mentioned, I cannot really tell you like what's the exact percentage because it's a different scale. It's not the exact abundance. It's in the log scale. So
Okay. No, that gives me some idea. So then
yeah.
it would be that's a similar decline that we're seeing on the long-tailed duck.
Yeah, absolutely. You can compare different species, not in terms of the percent change, but in terms of how sharp the decline is.
Yeah.
And it's especially useful to compare between areas because it's in the same scale. But you can also kind of compare between species. You can compare the how sharp the decline is between species, but not the abundance between the species. You know what I mean? Like um, yeah, because they are on different scales of abundance. So you cannot compare numbers. You can just compare how sharp the declines are. Does it make sense?
I think so. Yeah. So this green line here has about the same slope as the black line. The green line in the Harlequin duck chart has about the same slope as the black line in the
Exactly.
long-tailed duck. So therefore, if the green line is about a 50% decline, then that black line is also about a 50% decline.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
for.
you very much for that.
Oh no, you're welcome. No, I hope it's more clear now. Oh, these scientists always in their data all the time. So let's move to shorebirds. So as you remember on my graph for Canadian birds in general, shorebirds are showing very sharp declines overall. But in BC, we don't, with our program data at least, we don't see big declines. So that's a positive news. Most species show stable or increasing trends over 25 years. And even for species that were in trouble in the last analysis, we had Dunlin as a red flag. It was showing big declines. But with these new models, they don't seem to be declining too much. They're still significantly declining, but it's not as strong as we thought. And even they show recent increase, so it's quite encouraging. it's quite encouraging because I think we have about 20% of our of the whole population of dunlin that winters on our coast. So that's very important to preserve their habitat. So yeah, a lot of increasing and good news for a lot of shorebirds, but their habitat keeps being threatened by development projects across BC and especially around Vancouver. And so we need to keep focusing on preserving those habitat. If you look at shorebirds that use the rocky coast, so we have the turnstones, the surfbirds, and the oyster catchers, same thing, they're doing pretty okay. I just wanted once again to show like a sort of weird pattern. I mean, weird, I don't know if it's weird, but like the turnstone on the left, if you look at the green line once again for Vancouver, you can see that we are losing almost all our turnstones in the Vancouver area. So I don't know what's going on here, but once again, a sort of red flag here compared to the other regions. And finally, just a few other species that are very well monitored by the program, eagles and raptors in general, but I took the eagle here. We have some fluctuations over the years, but overall it's doing pretty okay. The kingfishers, same thing. The herons, they are showing some warning signs. So we need to keep watching those populations. I believe the subspecies of herons is not classified as threatened anymore. But we still need to watch those populations. So I think the program is really okay for that. So in summary, if I look at overall regional patterns or trends at the group level, at the guild level, what do we observe with this analysis? So overall, if we look at the outer coast of BC, so again, west.
Rémi, sorry, could I interrupt? I'm wondering if you could, we're wondering if this slide looks quite garbled and it feels really important. I'm wondering.
So at the regional level, on the outer coast overall, like once again, it's the region that groups the west coast of Vancouver Island, the center and north coast. All bird guilds are showing a significant increase over 25 years. So they're really doing okay in these areas, or at least as shown by the program data. However, in the Salish Sea, in the Strait of Georgia and Greater Vancouver area specifically, we have a lot of declines, like 20 species are suffering from significant declines in the Vancouver area specifically. And in the Salish Sea, overall, as you can see on the two graphs on the right, we have, if you look at for example, at the purple line, the Strait of Georgia, we have a notable decrease of species that eat on the ocean floor, benthivorous, like for example, scoters, lots of diving ducks, and long distance migrants. Long distance migrants overall are in trouble more than like local breeders, for example. So that shows you some patterns here. And long distance migrants are overall decreasing in BC. So that's pretty much what we observe in Canada in general. Like in Canada, long distance migrants are showing sharper declines than short distance migrants, for example. So that makes a lot of sense because they are experiencing more threats in general than other birds. And it's nice to observe what's going on at the group level, but when you look at trends at the group level, that's also hiding species-specific trends and local scale patterns. So it's good to look at the overall patterns at the guild level, but it's also very important to look at what we did, which is looking at different species and see what's going on. So to conclude on this analysis, as we can expect, the Greater Vancouver area and the Strait of Georgia require particular conservation attention. And so that's what we've been trying to work on. Why is this happening? So we believe that birds are exposed to stronger pressures in those areas than those on the outer coast. And so it's probably a combination of different factors that affect the fish resources and the benthic environment. And so we're trying to understand and address those threats. And so how do we do that? We are developing collaborations and doing further research. And I'm just going to quickly talk about what we've been doing to address that. And so, for example, we are working a lot with the Washington State partners and developing research projects together. We are partnering a lot with indigenous communities to survey more remote areas. We are trying to make our data open access. So anybody here can go on our website in Nature Counts and download all the data they want, basically. It's pretty open access, just like eBird. So because of that, creates more opportunities for research and try to understand what's going on. So how do we try to reverse the negative trends? Well, first, we try to understand what's going on. And for this, we need to collaborate, to do international collaborations. And so we work a lot with, I showed you, like with the partners at Washington State, for example, but also like more internationally with different partnerships. I just want to show you one example here. We did this transboundary trend analysis in the Salish Sea waters of British Columbia and Washington State, and we are about to publish the results. One example is we did the same trend analysis, but at the scale of both British Columbia and Washington State to see if there was like something going on here. And so we use data from both the Coastal Waterbird Survey in BC, but also the Puget Sound Seabird Survey in Washington State. And so I don't want to go into details here, but we're globally seeing the same things happening in Washington State. But I just wanted to show you an interesting example here with the surf scoters. So I told you earlier, the surf scoters, we've been tracking them, like we know they are shifting and moving a lot. And you can actually see it on this trend map. So if you look at this map, it's a map of the waters of the Salish Sea. And so to help you, I put the cities, Vancouver, Victoria, and Seattle. And all the areas that look red or orange, there are negative population trends. And all the areas that look more bluish, it's positive trends. And so what you can see is that they are kind of disappearing from the Strait of Georgia in the north, but they are increasing in numbers in the Puget Sound part. And we believe there is a sort of southward movements of that species. And the same thing is happening with the white-winged scoter as well. So it was very interesting to see that, to see those the sort of shifts in the areas they're using in the winter. Anyway, so what the study really emphasizes here is the need for coordinated management actions and the need to try to detect declines at finer scales. So the good news is that we can use and apply this framework for conservation planning in those transboundary waters. And that can be also applied to other contexts. And this analysis actually has inspired future collaborations. And so we're trying to do the same thing for wetland birds and other different programs. And finally, I just wanted to briefly mention a study that we recently published. My coworkers, Rory and Daniel, worked on that. So we tried to understand better if shipping activity and vessel traffic is affecting waterbirds. And so it's a study that explores differences in trends, in occupancy trends between areas of low and high vessel traffic for 24 different species in the Salish Sea. And once again, that uses data from both the Coastal Waterbird Survey and the Puget Sound Seabird Survey. So just to briefly show you what some of the results are. So on this graph on the left, just to help you interpret it, on the X you have the changes in occupancy trends. So to the right is positive occupancy trends, and to the left is negative occupancy trends. And they compared areas of low vessel traffic and high vessel traffic. And so if I show you one example highlighted in yellow here is for the common murre, you can see that there is a very big difference between occupancy trends when you look at areas of high vessel density. So high vessel density, they show more negative trends, and low vessel density, they are correlated with more positive trends. So what does it mean? That means that in areas of high vessel density, birds may face more disturbance. And for example, they have a higher energy cost and they spend less time foraging when there's a lot of boats on the water. And like the majority of the species that I show you today that are actually declining in the Salish Sea, they seem to show more negative trends in the areas of high vessel density. So that really reflects that additional pressure that the birds are facing. So that was one example of work that we're trying to do to understand better what's going on. And so just as a conclusion here for my presentation tonight, we are trying to curb coastal and marine threats. And the keyword is really collaborative efforts to try to better identify and understand the bird groups we need to focus on, the causes of declines to address. One of them, for example, was the shipping activity is one threat for coastal water birds. And finally, we're trying to identify the areas to prioritize for conservation action. So that's what we're trying to do with coastal water birds. And hopefully you see that slide okay. It's my final slide. I wanted to thank you for your attention. If you are interested in participating in the Coastal Waterbird Survey, please send me an email if you want to be involved, if you're curious, if you have any question or comment, I would be happy to read your message. A special thank you to Daniel and Rory. They are really the masters for statistical analysis, so I really thank them for their help. I also want to thank you, all our volunteers. We have more than 300 volunteers for this program, and thanks to them, we are able to do these analyses. So it's amazing. Some volunteers have been collecting data on their beach for the past 25 years, so that's really amazing. So I thank them for that. And also, I want to, of course, I want to thank all the First Nations we are working on, and also the Coastal-ish nations in general for allowing us to do some research in their traditional territories. And yeah, if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. I don't know what time I did, how much time.
Oh, that's good. Thank you very much, Rémi. There was a question in the chat. Kate Taylor asked, are herons impacted by increased predation by raptors, bald eagle and crows?
That's a good question. Yeah, we know bald eagles are influencing populations of seabirds, and like specifically, like we published a study about the impact of eagle populations on sea ducks specifically. For herons, I'm not sure. I believe they are predators of the youngs, but I'm not sure if there is a direct impact. But that's a good question, something to look at. I think, yeah, the main predators of herons are probably like eagles and some other raptors.
Sorry, I wasn't allowing people to unmute themselves. That's changed now, so people can unmute to ask questions. So that should help. I did have a question, which was, now that I saw the unmute thing, I'm forgetting my question. Oh, the done one. You said the Dunlin populations are seeming stable, but people were thinking they were decreasing. So anecdotally, it feels to me like I'm not seeing as many Dunlin at Boundary Bay as I did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what is the evidence that that the populations are stable? I'm just curious.
So, okay, so maybe I'm going to rephrase. So the analysis showed significant declines over 25 years, but it's not as big as we thought. Like 5 years ago, they were really in trouble, but with our new models, they're not showing as sharp declines as they were. And the thing I pointed out on the graph, I can show you again the graph, but we've been observing more stable population trends recently, um, at least according to our data. So it's a bit more encouraging, but yeah, like I'm sure that you're seeing a difference, and that makes sense. And that's also what the data shows is that 10 years ago there were more Dunlins, but the decline seems to slow down a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not very positive because I know that the Roberts Bank extension project is most definitely affect Dunlins and of course Western Sandpipers. So I'm not super optimistic about that, but yeah, at least it's not as sharp as it used to be before.
Remy, Graj is asking if you have if he can have your contact, and I was wondering if you could drop that into the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna share my email information.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I also had another question for you. So I'm a student and I'm working on a winter waterbird survey on sturgeon banks right now.
Yeah.
So every week we're going to survey, or we are surveying birds at this area. And I was wondering if it was easy to get some of the data from that area if Birds Canada has done. I know you said something about nature counts.
Absolutely.
So that has that data. And I a question I had was like in your data set, did tide height or wind have any influence on the count variability while you were doing that? I know it's always at the same time every month, but yeah, just wondering if that was accounted for or if that made a difference.
So the time of survey, you're asking for the time of survey?
No, I'm asking if the tide height or
Oh, the tidal
the
height. Oh,
wind.
that's a good question. It's something we are recording, but you know, it's a bit technical, but like basically we are using the tide information in the models to like we are accounting for the tide, like if the tide is going up or down, for example, we are accounting for the survey duration, all these kind of things, but we're not specifically looking at the effect of the tide height on bird numbers. But I'm sure there is some sort of impact on the bird numbers you're counting, but the model is actually accounting for that. So you're inputting that in the model, and then you're basically saying to the model, okay, like tell me if bird numbers are changing with removing the effect of the tide height. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we're not specifically looking at that if that has an impact, because yeah, it's definitely it's probably affecting the numbers you have. So it's a sort of detection covariate, but we're not at all looking at the effect of that variable, if that makes sense. So I'm just
Yeah, I guess I'll have to look at the data a little bit to see, or at least the paper to see what the model is and what's happening, but it makes sense. I'm just wondering, are any real like management decisions made with this data because of this data set, or do you know if you're in talks for some changes?
Yeah, so that definitely helps with conservation plans and further that tells us, okay, what do we need to focus on, especially research efforts and collaborations, as I mentioned in the presentation. Um, I also know that a lot of our data is used by like for environmental impact assessment, so that might directly influence that. We're not doing that directly ourselves, but it definitely guides, the priorities. It guides the future research projects, and and we're able to identify, areas and species to focus on. So sea ducks is one of the big ones. I'm intrigued by the results for the Western grebe, so I would like to keep doing research on that species and see what's going on if we observe that all across the range or not. So yeah, there's a few warning signs we're trying to focus on. Um, but yeah, a lot of people use our data, and so I just wanted to share. If you're interested in looking at the data, in downloading and doing any sort of analysis yourself, I'm going to share um, our Explore tool. And actually, it's a really nice tool because you can see trends in different regions using different programs for different species. So it's a really nice mapping tool. And so for your question specifically, Agraj, if you want to look at data from sturgeon banks specifically, you can filter data by drawing a polygon on the map, and then you'll get all the data for whatever species you're interested in for whatever years. And so, yeah, I'm going to put that in the chat right now.
So Remy, we
Yeah,
have a few
thank you
more
so much.
questions. Oh, thank you. We have a few more questions. One from Brioni. She's asking, what do you think are the impacts of declining herring populations in all the bays around the Salish Sea, both in
Mhm.
the winter and the spring? And a few more
Absolutely.
questions
Yeah,
after.
we believe it has a dramatic impact, and all the declines we see in the Strait of Georgia can be definitely related to fish abundance. So I absolutely think it has a huge influence. Um, yeah, we so it's really hard to test, right? Because I think so. One thing we've been discussing internally at Birds Canada is to try to collaborate more with fisheries, um, and do more studies together to see like the direct impact of fish abundance on waterbird populations. But for now, it's only guesses. But yeah, we believe that the herring, the decrease of herring abundance is affecting a lot of different birds.
Janet had a comment about Western grebes, and they are in trouble in their breeding areas in the US. Nests are being destroyed by varying water levels, etc.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah,
Did
absolutely. So, for example, like the declines we see here are not necessarily attributed to what's going on in the winter in BC. It might be, of course, attributed also to threats in the other parts of their cycle. So that's a good example. I think grebes, like that might be the breeding populations that are affected more than the wintering populations. But it's something we need to test, of course.
Denny and Teresa, they comment that the new model shows different trends. Can you address how the same data can lead to different statistics?
Interesting question. So what do you mean exactly? I'm just sharing one second. Sharing the Nature Counts website for people to download data. Okay. So different models can show different things. Yeah, a model is just a model. So a model is a way to predict how, specifically for trend analysis, it's an indicator to predict how bird population changes over time. And depending on what you put in the model, you can have different results. So I'm not an expert of these models that we've used. I've been helped a lot by specific um, data analysts for that, but I know that their models are very robust and they incorporate as I explained earlier, they incorporate information borrowed from neighboring sites to make predictions more reliable and robust. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, the choice of model is very important, and that can show different results. And so compared to the analysis we did 5 years ago, when you compare 20-year trends and 25-year trends with our new models, we have most of the results are pretty similar. So it's kind of like of a good indication that we haven't done anything wrong in the past. But I think our robots now are a bit better, and methods are evolving very fast. And so now you're better able to make better predictions with new methods.
So I think I can respond to that question in a way that might make sense, talking about, say, the Christmas bird count. So if you're trying to interpret results from the Christmas bird count, one of the things that are always reported is time and effort. And depending on, so you assume, if you're using that data, that if you've got 5 observers in a party, they're going to see some number more birds than if you just have one person observing by themselves. And so you have to adjust for the count numbers based on the number of observers and how long they were looking in that stretch. And depending how you do that adjustment, that can result in different outcomes in your model for what your population trends show. And if you do it wrong, you can be wildly wrong in terms of the number of birds you've got. And if you do it, but if you're careful, hopefully you will get a better result than if you don't do any adjustment at all. So I think it's that kind of effect that they're probably talking about here. Does that make sense to me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, depending on what you input in your model, it's gonna make things more reliable. So of course we try to incorporate the survey effort, environmental variables, detection covariates, to make results more robust and precise. So yeah, that's a good question, but it's a bit technical. Like if we look at how the models are built, it's more technical question.
There's a comment from Joan in the chat that says, a few years ago, I was seeing large flocks of western grebes and surf scoters in areas offshore of the Gulf Islands in the spring and fall, too far offshore for any beach surveyors. Is it possible that some of the birds are using different areas outside of the survey areas, but maybe still within, say, the Salish Sea region?
Absolutely. And I was talking about that, especially for mures and this kind of species that use more like less shoreline habitat. And so, yeah, it's definitely possible that some areas are not very well surveyed and some species don't spend too much time near the coast. And so for those ones, we are very careful with how we interpret the results. And so we're always trying to increase the coverage to have a better idea. But, if I take the example of the Western grebe, like I think the data is really, really showing an actual decline because they're declining everywhere in BC, not just in certain areas, but everywhere. So that's kind of, you can draw some general patterns when you look at the data overall. But yeah, some things are hidden by, like less coverage or things we, of course, not able to detect. And that's a very good comment. Like we're not able to detect everything, but we hope that, well, at least our program data is one of the most reliable source of bird population changes in BC for waterbirds. So, but yeah, some species require additional efforts for sure, and local scale efforts as well.
Rioni had a comment about our loss of western grebes in Sansom Narrows off Salt Spring also coincided with the winter scene boats taking out the bait balls.
Mm-hmm. And I see one question is DFO using any of our data to make any decisions? I hope so, but we need to work more with them. Um, I think they yeah, in the past they have used our data. I don't remember exactly for what, but yeah, I know that government is using our data a lot, but I don't know exactly what they're doing with it. But yeah, we really hope to work with them more closely in the future. I believe there is something with the fish resources, of course, at least in the Salish Sea, the herring. So yeah, we hope to develop more collaborations with them. And so if you work for DFO, please email me. We are trying to develop partnerships more.
Thank you, Rémi, for the excellent presentation, and thanks to all of you for being here. We also want to acknowledge our volunteers and supporters who make events like this possible. This concludes our presentation tonight. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.